I'm going to go ahead and do the live stream here. So I should have that already set up to go. Going to the group. All right. And
how's everybody doing? Find the chat while we're getting settled and let us know if you have questions. When you're headed to the DC area, that might be cool to know. We want to make sure you're comfortable and know where your buttons are. Find the chat, find the Q&A. We'll be watching those throughout.
all right, so it's telling me that I do not have permission to create live video in the group, Kelly.
Oh, you gotta add the shoot.
Well, give me 1 second while I figure that out, because I'm the admin of the group. So I thought I had enabled live on here not that long ago. So
if you add the app in your group settings, you just have to go through and chat, like go to your group settings and add Zoom. And it should let you do that. Welcome, okay. You guys. I'm going to hang out and chat with y'all while Julie's getting that situated. How's everybody doing? Hey, Jana, I see you. Hey, Lee from Romania. What? That's so cool. Okay, fun game. Who's watching from the farthest away? Hey, Mary. Hey, Lisa. I'm in North Carolina. Is anybody at Fort Bragg? Do I have any neighbors? California. Tamara, is that correct? Tell me if that's right. Julie, hey, from Fort Benning. Hey, Mary at Drum with all the, oh yeah, you guys got some serious snow. Hopefully you dug out okay. I love those photos.
Hey, Kelly, where do I go to add the app?
In your group settings, it's at the very bottom.
Hold on.
Or if you want to add me as an admin, I could probably.
I'm in the settings.
Okay. Usually it's at the, like if you go to group settings at the very bottom, it'll say apps. So you might click your group settings, go to the very bottom and say apps, and then you got to search.
I got it. I got it.
Cool. Who else we got? Melissa at Fort Leavenworth. Karen, Drum's the coldest for sure. Jana's in Florida. Jana, we're not even going to talk to you today. Sorry, friend. Like that's no, ma'am. Let's see. Hey, from Norfolk. Allison, welcome. Hey, you guys, if you're chatting in the group, you'll also see an option to send the chat to the host and the panelist, or you can send the chat to everyone. You're welcome to use either, but if you want the entire group to see your comment or your question, make sure you toggle everyone. Hey, Michelle from Fort Knox. Hey, Kimberly and Burke.
Okay, we are live stream now. I've got it all figured out. So thank you for that tip, Kelly. We're all set. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this fun Wednesday, February 2nd. Well, we're going to talk about best practices for rentals in the National Capital Region. And this is being hosted by MilSpouseFest. And I'm pleased to have my friend Kelly Artis, who many of you know from Millie, on with us today. And what you probably are wondering, like, why are we doing this with MilSpouseFest? And why are we coming into GAMS? And I just want to give you a quick little brief overview about who we are at MilSpouseFest and what we do. We are the modern network for military spouses. We host in-person and live events and virtual events all over the country, and we have a fantastic year's worth of content that we're going to be bringing to you. So my team member, Mary Lane Montoya, she's going to drop the link to our February events that are coming up February 15th and 17th of Unite and Ignite. And we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion in the military space and what that looks like. And our team is so excited about this. If you guys have heard of Jennifer Dane or Modern Military Association, she's going to be our keynote speaker. Now that has nothing to do with the topic today, except, you know, we're going to have Kelly back as an exhibitor at our event. So if you want to have more time, one-on-one time with her, you're going to get to talk with her then. And so to our GAMS friends that we're streaming live to, we have a panel of realtors here, and they really wanted to bring content to you guys because we have so many posts and questions from new people moving into the National Capital area. Like, raise your hand, drop a comment in, and tell me, like, are you getting ready to move or are you already living here? Like, that's one thing we want to know about. And we know how stressful it is. This is one of the most difficult areas to move to. It is a huge area and it just stresses everyone out. And then more people comment and then more people in the group get stressed out. And so Susie Klein was like, we need to calm everyone down. So can't we do a webinar? So that's why we're here today, to talk about this. And I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to share with you about Millie and how they can help you feel less stressed and more prepared for your upcoming PCS.
Julie, you nailed it. It is such a stress. I don't know why. Like, and I mentally PCS for a living, right? It's kind of my thing, with all the content and everything, and the resources that we offer on Millie. But DC is just an overwhelming place to think about moving to. There are just so many things that you feel like you need to know and you need to explore. And it's almost like you always have this luxury at other installations where you're like, oh, it's fine. I know the type of neighborhood I'm looking for. I'm going to find that. I'm going to ask a couple questions in a group. Somebody will say, oh yeah, you want the west side or whatever. And you're like, cool, there you go. There's my house. And then you find a house there. Well, there's like a million of those options in the DC area, right? It's all just which bubble you want to pick, right? Which thing you're going to prioritize in your search. So I know, I'm telling you, I've been there. My husband was stationed at Fort Belvoir. So I had to say the Pentagon, that's not real. He was stationed at Fort Belvoir a few years back. And I felt the exact same way. We were moving in from California, so it was going to be a coast to coast move. And I was just so overwhelmed at like, where do you even start? Right. So we're going to try to help break that down for you. And I'm so excited for you to meet these awesome panelists. You guys have a treasure trove of wisdom here that I hope you take every advantage of. Ask all of your questions. Also, Julie, I want to mention too, we're going to be watching throughout. So if you guys see this Q&A bubble down here at the bottom, it's actually the best and like easiest way for the panelists to be able to receive your questions. So if you have an actual question, if you drop it down in that Q&A tab, then we can keep track of what we've answered and what we still need to answer. I'm going to be watching that throughout, but feel free to continue using the chat, right? If you just have comments as we go, shout outs, experiences you want to share or anything like that, let us know. Okay, so what is Millie? Who am I? Also, my name is Kelly. Known Julie for quite a while. This group was a resource for me when I moved to the DC area. That's probably when I first bumped into you online, Julie. So you guys are just so fortunate to have this awesome resource. But from there, I also became the COO of a company called Millie. And our whole purpose and existence is to help alleviate the stress of a PCS. We come out of PCS from maybe a different angle. We're not so much, we have some hands-on service providers, but our number one focus is making sure that you all are able to make informed decisions, right? We want to make sure that you have the information and the data points you need in advance to be able to start making decisions. So why are we having this webinar in February? Because now is the time you need to you're doing your research and making your decisions. Gone are the days that we used to do the 10 days of permissive TDY and pack up and move on base, right? That was literally the way the system was set up to run. And that's not the way we do things anymore. We have the internet, we have our networks, we live off base, right? For the most part. I mean, 70-something% of military families live off the installation now. So we need to be getting a jump on our research as early as we have even a rumor of orders, right? So the way Millie is set up is actually you can come to our site and look at our base guides. I mean, everybody's got base guides, right? But I want to tell you what's special about ours. Ours, we actually sourced all of the information from focus groups of military spouses stationed at each installation. So you can go there and literally see the photos that we hired a military spouse to take to see what it actually lives or looks like to live in that area as a military family. So you're able to kind of benefit from the expertise of the military spouse community, but then you're also getting sort of an objective filtered version of that as well, because we tried to maintain certain standards across each base, because I don't know about y'all, but right now you might be sitting on potentially 3 different duty stations that you're headed to and you don't know which one yet. So maybe you're like me and you want to get a jump and learn all 3 of the duty stations in advance, right? You can do that on our site with some really high level information that's filtered out, right? It's only the pertinent stuff, the relevant stuff, things like what does the commute actually look like? What is it like to actually live there? What's the climate like? Do I need to buy snowsuits because we're moving to Drum, right, friend? You'll learn sort of the high level stuff. You'll kind of learn what the areas are called. I always found that really hard to kind of wrap my head around. at first, when we first started PCSing, because people in the different groups, if you go to the local group, they'll call areas by like what it's known locally. Well, you don't know that coming in yet, right? Fort Campbell is a great example of this. Who's been stationed at Fort Campbell and they say exit 10 or exit 6. Okay, what does that even mean, right? Because you can't usually Google exit 6 and come up with information about a neighborhood, right? So we try to break some of that stuff down for you. What are the unique things and aspects that you're going to be uh, able to experience in these different areas? And then what are the things that you're going to need to maybe sacrifice? Right. So when it comes to specifically DC, the one nugget that I know we kind of embraced as a family moving there and as people giving advice to families moving there are you usually have three factors in DC that are the ones you need to kind of rack and stack, right? So you've got home size, home price, and commute are the three things you need to start wrapping your head around. You're probably going to get one or two of those things that you are happy about, and one of them you're probably going to have to sacrifice a bit on. And I will let our realtor friends explain all of that and what all that means in a bit, but we just kind of keep in mind there's always going to be something that you might need to give a little on. You may need to spend a little bit more money to get the house that is the size that you want, and maybe the commute's a bit longer than you expected, but you got the one thing, the priority. So the biggest piece of advice I'll give you is to assess your family and know what makes you guys happy. Like, what are the things that make you happy? Maybe it's the short commute and spending more time with your service member. Therefore, you're going to be in a tiny little shoebox house, right? Depending on which base you're actually located at or going to be stationed at. So when we talk about realtors also, I want to let you guys know that you have the opportunity to vet your team. And I want to encourage you all to do that. There are specific, not all areas have real estate agents who are willing to work in the rental market. So you're super fortunate in that in the DC area, you're going to have access to folks who are going to be able to help you with rentals, which is amazing. But I want you to make sure that you know that you can interview these people and ask them questions. Don't just open Zillow and pick the face that's next to the listing, right? Ask questions. These people are going to be instrumental in making sure that you secure your housing, right? That stuff doesn't get like taken out from under you, that you're not experiencing the horror stories that sometimes rise to the top. That's not necessary, right? If you vet your team in advance, and this goes back to Millie's whole getting set up ahead of time, making sure that you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed before the PCS actually starts, then you'll be able to be set up for success in the long run. So I just really quickly want to show you guys, and we'll make this download available to you all somehow, Julie. But I want to show you guys this quick little infographic that we came up with to help you sort of to provide a guide on what kinds of questions you can ask a real estate agent. They're not going to be offended, right? That was my first thought. We're like, oh, we should interview agents. We're like, I don't want to be offensive. This is not offensive. They're professionals, right? They're interviewing to be able to secure your business. This is a business transaction, right? It's emotional for you probably, but these are professional service providers, and you want to make sure that you've got folks that are on your team for the right reasons, right? So just some quick generic questions that you can ask to get the conversation started. They'll give you a really good feel for who you're going to be working with. How many years have you been an agent is an easy one, right? How many military clients have you served? All right. So this question will open the door to how savvy, right, are you with our lifestyle and the parameters around our lifestyle. That will actually open the gate to understanding how well they know all of the things you're about to hear about from our awesome real estate agent panel. There are going to be terminology thrown around. There's going to be acronyms galore. There's going to be all sorts of legislation and rules and regulatory things that they're going to need to know that apply specifically to military families. So you need to make sure that they are tracking all of those things. Now is not the time to be teaching your agent how to do things and how to navigate this, right? They need to know a lot more than you do about these things. Do you work with rentals? That honestly, maybe that should be number one if you're looking at a rental. But if you've got an agent that does both, think about how advantageous that's going to be in the long run. Because if you end up staying in the DC area, which a lot of people do, you've already established a relationship with someone that you know and trust, and who better to get your business and to help navigate you through maybe a purchase down the line if you've already established that they do both. Can I chat with some of your past clients? And don't be scared to do this, y'all. This is great. I mean, I'm sure any agent would be happy to provide you with testimonials, reviews, things like that. They should be proud of them and have them readily available somewhere. But also, hey, not only would you be able to chat with someone who has experience working with them, but that person may also be able to give you some insight on how the process or what the process was like for them in finding a rental, specifically in this area. I always like to know preferred mode of communication. My mother-in-law just went through purchasing a house here in North Carolina, and we went back and forth with the differences in style of communication. She's a texter. She likes to text. And her agent was just better on the phone. And it took us a while to figure that out, right? So she just finally learned, oh, I have to pick up the phone and call him. But that was something that she had to learn on her own. Just ask. Right? Are you a texter? Or are you a pick up the phone and call kind of person? It's just good to establish. What's your current client load will just kind of help you understand how much time potentially they have or do not have for you. So just kind of be aware of that and how many other priorities they may have at the moment. Your availability on weekends is huge. Sometimes folks are only doing real estate kind of on the side. Which I guess could be okay, but you need to make sure that when you're available, they're available, right? So that's a good question to kind of open that topic up. How much do you get paid? I know y'all think this might be a tacky question. I felt like it might have been at first too, but really this is a legitimate question that no one should be offended at answering, because really this is money that you're paying them, right? If you buy any other service or pay for any other thing, you're going to get an invoice or an estimate. So understanding their compensation structure around rentals and around purchasing a home or selling a home really helps, again, just make sure that you have in perspective what the incentives are behind the transaction. So just something to know, and you might learn something new there as well. So the typical days on market kind of applies more for the purchase side, but this also just, again, gives you an idea of how good they are at what they do, right? So that's a fair question to ask as well. And then the last, my favorite, and honestly, sometimes I think one of the most important, is what's your connection to the military? There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just, it's a data point for you to be able to know and understand and know who you're working with. So knowing whether or not they're a military spouse and have struggled through the same things that you guys have struggled through, that I've struggled through in a move, some of even just the personal connections that you can make with people who understand the stress that could be attached to a PCS. If they're a veteran, they know how to navigate certain aspects of even just the back end of the DoD stuff, right? The actual PCS itself. If there's someone who has a family connection to the military that's a bit farther down, or if they're just co-located near an installation and have no connection, that's fine too. But again, you can press a little harder on, do you know the acronyms? Are you going to speak my language, right? I just find that super helpful as an interview question. So there's hopefully something that's helpful for you guys as you're moving forward through this process. I will be available throughout if you all have specific questions about Millie, or if I can chime in. And again, I'm going to be watching the comments and chatting with you guys here in the Zoom and then also on Facebook. So
thank you so much, Kelly. This infographic is really helpful, and it covers, I would say, almost all of the topic areas that we hear frequently from our GAMS members. And so for anybody who's listening and they're like, what's GAMS? GAMS is Greater Alexandria Military Spouses, now GAMS, National Capital Region Military Spouses. It's a Facebook group for military spouses in the National Capital Region. So because we are going to be recording this and putting this out on YouTube to a larger audience. So we would love to be able to email that infographic out to everyone who is registered to this. And Kelly, if you can help me, then we can load that document up into our guides in our Facebook group as well. And then I'm sure, MilSpouseFest can share that out on our social channels as well. I know that's going to be super helpful. So it is now my pleasure. So if all of my realtors on the panel want to go ahead and turn on your cameras and your microphones, I'm going to introduce you all. And I'm so happy that you all wanted to work and help support our community. You all have been, I like to call you our legacy realtors in the Facebook group. You've been there day in and day out for years, helping in the community beyond just real estate. And you are doing this just as a service to the community. So I just wanted to give you guys a great shout out. So Karen Olmsted, you are going to go first, and you're going to talk about the timeline of renting and what that should be look like. So I'm going to let you talk and introduce yourself real quickly.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I actually am going to be talking about the timeline. I felt like everybody got their orders for Christmas, and made a joke about it that this year, you know, we never know when people's orders are going to get, but this year I felt like everybody got them for Christmas. And then we just were like, oh my gosh, it's hitting early. And we started chatting, and we're like, okay, we have to calm everybody down. And then we got together and wanted to put this together. I'm a military spouse. My husband is still in the reserves. He's been in the reserves. I call him an old fart. He's been in for a long time. So I'm active in the community. I've lived here for a long time. So, but you know, we can talk about that later, but we want to basically talk about you guys today and educate you and help to support you in everything that's been going on. So the timeline. So you can secure a rental now, or you can wait for a little longer. So really the best thing to do is to interview an agent like Kelly had talked about. Really what you want to do is you want to try to help somebody to figure out and navigate this craziness that when you're coming to the national capital area. So you want to, you know, possibly interview a couple people and figure out who's going to be the best fit for you. Once you figure that out, you want to figure out, okay, probably 6 months out. You know, everyone always asks, what's the best time? Well, sometimes you don't get your orders for 30 days out. Okay, well, that kind of puts us in a little panic mode, but we figure it out for you. Leave that to us to panic for you, okay? Trust me, leave that to us. We'll help you figure it out. And we'll do it. But we really like to have a little bit more time for that. So what we really like to do is we ask you, when are you coming here? What is your ETA? And then we back it up from there. So we're going to figure out about 6 months from now. So what we do is we're going to go 6 months from now. So let's say we're in January, February right now. So you're going to come here in about May. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you, and we're going to figure out that date. And we're going to set you up. We're going to interview with you, and we're going to talk to you, and we're going to set you up with an MLS search. We're going to talk to you about your wants and your needs, and we're going to set you up with an MLS search. What that is the multiple listing search. And we're going to ask you, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, I want to live in this certain neighborhood. And through our interview with you, you know, we're going to interview you just like you would interview us. And we're going to talk to you about what your wants and your needs are and what you want for your family. We're going to talk to you about your price point. We're going to talk to you whether or not you have pets. And, you know, we're going to get into some of that later on with some of the other agents. But that's going to help us to help figure out what is going to be the best area for you. You know, some of you say you want to be at Arlington. Some of you may want to be in Woodbridge. Some of you may want to be in Stafford. We're not going to ask you for mileage. We're going to ask you on how many miles or how much time do you want to be on the road? Because it's not about mileage around here. It's all about time that you want to be on the road. So do you want to bike to work? Do you want to walk to work? Do you want to take the metro to work? Do you want to be on a commuter bus? So these are all different things that we're going to ask you, and that's going to help us to figure it out. So then we're going to figure out, are you going to come here for a visit? Are you going to visit? Are you going to do a visit 3 months out? Are you going to do just do a site visit just to get your feel of the neighborhoods to figure out, okay, just to figure out the neighborhoods of, okay, maybe I just want to figure, do I want to be in a neighborhood that has sidewalks and just get that? And then we can figure out, okay, you know what? Stafford's too far for me. I want to be in Alexandria. And then we can be like, okay, we can narrow that down. Maybe you're not going to be able to visit here. And then we're like, okay, then we don't have to do that. We're just going to help you figure it out. So through that search, we're going to be like, okay, you don't need to come here. Then we'll just set up the search and we'll monitor the MLS together. And probably about, you know, the 3 month mark, we as real estate agents, we're going to go out and we're going to look at these houses with you. And maybe it might be one weekend we say, okay, we're going to go out and look at 6 rentals for you, or 2 rentals. And we're going to go look at those renters. We're going to go look at those rentals, and we're going to, we may do live videos, or we may videotape them, and send them to you. And you're going to pick that from those and say, I want to put an application in on that rental. And then we help you fill that process out. And then we start going from there. You may get it on the first try. You may not get it on the first try. And then we continue along the process from there. It is competitive, so we have to have our ducks in a row. And some of the other agents will go into how we have those ducks in a row. So it is a process though, but this timeline of interviewing the agent, setting up the MLS search, having your documents in a row, and working through that timeline of having things in place and securing things along the way will help you to better prepare as you go along. And if you decide, 4 months out, it's secured and it fits in your timeline. And when I say fits in your timeline, if you're going to be here in June 1st and the rental is available on May 15th, if that's the timeline and that will work out, then you say, okay, I want to sign the lease for that. Then that would be the right time. It's not a set in stone thing. That's what you have to realize is you'll find with talking with us, there's a lot of, how do I want to say this? There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of, this may work here. It's not, everything is set in stone. There's a lot of, your lease is not going to start on the first of the month all the time. So there's a lot of give and take and a lot of movement with everything. So, and I think you'll hear that through some of the conversation today. So it's very fluid with this timeline, I think is what I'm trying to say there.
Thank you, Karen. And this is where I'm going to give my plug. And this is why our GAMS team really recommends actually interviewing a realtor and having them help you with your rental process. So we're not endorsing any particular realtor. That's why we're asking you to talk with all of them. But those are some really great tips. And you can use that professional who's been working in that market for years to help you guide that. So I'm going to ask Jennifer to go ahead and come on and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hernandez, and I'm a military spouse. My husband was active duty for 25 years, and we retired in the DMV area 5 years ago. So we've been in and out in several PCSs here, and this is now home. I am a full-time real estate agent, but I also volunteer a lot in the community. That's very important to me, is to give back to our community. So that's a little bit about me. Now, I have the really fun technical part of this. Karen and Kelly are a really hard act to follow. They gave so much great information, but I'm going to go over the exclusive right to represent. And I know that can be a super scary word out there. The minute you have chosen your realtor after doing some interviews, that realtor is going to ask you to sign an exclusive right to represent tenant agreement. That's what it is in Virginia, known as. And we thought that we'd like to break all that down for you and answer some questions. And so it's very technical. Any realtor that you're working with will be can provide this agreement for you. It is something that we do have in Virginia, have to have signed in order to represent you. So the big question is, what is the tenant broker agreement? And in Virginia, the tenant signs a broker agreement with an agent that they're working with that is legally committed to representing the landlord of a home. So if you don't sign, let me say that right. If you do not sign a broker agreement, the agent isn't legally required to represent you. Tenants and agents who have agreed to work together must outline the terms of their agreement in a formal written document. And so when you enter the tenant agreement, signing this agreement, it ensures that you have a realtor that is legally committed to representing you. And with this representation, an agent is looking out for your best interest and not the landlord. And so that could be a little technical, and that's, if I sounded too technical, I don't want to. The key terms of the buyer broker agreement is that it's broken down into several sections. And I was going to share it, but we can, Julie can post it or send it out. And again, any of your agents will have it. And the breakdown, and the most important is that the buyer broker agreement is going to have a length of term. And what this means is that in our area, most of the time when you start the rental process, say the 90 days, as Karen had referenced, you're going to sign this agreement for a 90-day time period. And that means that your agent is committed with you to do your house hunt, and that your agent is committed with you, and that they will be committed, and you'll be committed in return to them. It's about the commitment part. And a lot of questions I get is that they want to sign this agreement, and then they're like, well, what if I want to terminate this agreement? And there's a section in the tenant agreement that outlines the termination. Your agent will put in a day when you sign, how many days. Normally it could be 30 days, it could be 1 day. You can sign a broker agreement for representation for just 1 day. If it's only for one house, you can do it for 90 days. If that's the realtor you want to work for. So make sure you just talk to your agent, because the tenant broker agreement will have a length and a term that you can have. And again, the agent's working out for your best interest. The other very big question we get is on the tenant agreement. There's one thing for retainer fees. Our area here in the DC area really doesn't do retainer fees, and most of us do not charge that. But what it also does is that we're, with this buyer broker agreement, that we're looking out for serious tenants and not just looky-loos. Sometimes a lot of people go from realtor to realtor, and you really want to have this agreement signed so that you have one agent that is vested in your PCS move to this area, because it can be rough. The other part of this agreement is the payment. Everyone wants to know how they work with a realtor, and they always hear, well, it's free to work with a realtor, or I have to pay to work with a realtor. In this agreement, the terms are spelled out, and normally it's not to get too confusing, it's 25% of the 25% of the full month's rent. So whatever the agreed rent would be for your lease, the agent's brokerage would get paid 25% of that. And that is how a realtor is paid in compensation. And it must be in writing. Because in other words, the landlord will pay that commission to the brokerage. There's also another really important part of this, is that there's designated representation. And that's really important, because that means that your agent and your brokerage, your agent can show you specific properties within the brokerage and do that. And then there's also dual representation, which means that you agree to see properties your agent might list. A lot of us here in the Northern Virginia area, we list rentals, and we also help clients with rentals. And it has to be disclosed who's representing who. And if in this agreement, you don't want to have representation from an agent that they're also the listing agent, it is spelled out in this agreement, and that's dual representation. And then most of it, what does this all mean really in short terms? What does tenant agency mean? What do agents do? And of course, with this agreement, we search for homes, we tour homes for you, and so much more that a lot of you don't realize, because Karen, I think, is amazing. Everybody on this panel is amazing. And they take so many tours, they know the market and they know the neighborhoods. And the bottom line, this is not to scare you. It's just to have a conversation with your agent on who represents who. Bottom line is the agreement just, it spells out compensation, who gets paid and when, and it also spells out who's representing who. And in our area, you really need to have representation if you're going to search for some rentals. So hope that made sense.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I do have a question that I want to read live. So sure. Lee asks, do you work with apartment complexes?
Hi, Lee. I know, Lee. So in Northern Virginia, I've worked with a few apartment complexes that will work with a real estate agent, but most of the time, apartments have their own designated property managers or agents within the apartment building that are going to help you with that lease process. I know of like 2 in Crystal City that would work with an agent, but the rest want to use their designated agent.
And I can chime in there a little bit. I actually have worked with apartment complexes. It is hit or miss. You do need to call ahead usually, and or when you walk in, you can walk in with an agent. and you just go up to them and ask them if they will work with an agent. They will pay an agent. If you walk in with an agent, that agent just needs to know, that's just a question that you need to have with your agent ahead of time. Will they work with you even if that apartment complex won't pay or won't pay ahead of time? So that's just one question you have to have. But when you walk in, you need to tell them who you are and give them your business card anyway. No matter where you go, you need to say who you are, as who you're representing anywhere you go, and then because that you're representing that person, and then not that you always want to get paid. I mean, we all want to get paid, but you need to just say that you're representing, and then ask them if they are, and if it's not, then you still want to represent your client. And then and some of them do, some of them don't, and then you just handle the paperwork afterwards. But there are a fair amount of them. They don't like to pay you. To be honest with you, they don't like to pay you, but they will. And then it's just nice though. And it's nice also if there is a real estate agent, because there are certain things when you go into apartment complexes that there are certain military discounts that a lot of people don't know, and they won't know how to ask for that. So there are certain discounts and there are certain things. So if there is an agent out there that is seasoned that knows that, there are certain things that you can ask working with apartment complexes that normally people wouldn't know just coming off the street.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate that. So Jennifer, I was going to ask one other question when you were talking about the right to represent, and it's not one that came in, it's just one that I've seen get asked a lot. And I think that sometimes people have a different expectation about what realtors should be doing or not doing. And sometimes we see some of our spouses who get a little bit anxious and they start to agent shop. And then they're like, well, I'm just going to go over and look at this like on Military by Owner or wherever. So what do you do? I mean, and every agent is different. I do know that. I'm going to say a caveat. So there are some agents that will help a client with a Military by Owner or some other listing that's not through an agency. Can you talk about that for one quick minute before we go to Heidi?
That happens to me quite a bit. My husband calls me the ultimate volunteer when it comes to helping my military families with rentals. I do have that because immediately when I'm interviewing with clients, I do have that conversation about the tenant broker agreement. But I also tell them, you need to look on, and I'm going to cover this a little bit. You've got to look at all avenues, not just the MLS, but you've got to be on Military by Owner because there are just gems on there. The Facebook pages, there are gems on there. And what I've done with my clients, because we've had honest conversations, I will actually go out, and if they feel like that's the house, that's what I need, that's where I'm living, I actually will go out for them, go look at the house, because you have to smell the house, you have to make sure it's all good, and I'll do a video tour for them and help them with the lease. But I actually won't charge them, just because living that life for so many years. But that's what I do, and everybody does it different.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next panelist and add the spotlight here. So I'm figuring out my spotlights. Heidi Robbins, I am so glad that you can join us today. And so some of you in the group know, she's our local Arlington expert, but she's going to get into the nitty gritty here. And can you share about the application and per adult and what you need to do? And, for those of us who have older kids, which I know you do too, what does that look like?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being a part of this. I myself, as when Kelly talked earlier about how difficult it is to PCS to DC, did it twice and it was not pleasant, both times coming from Germany, and it was still harder than moving to Germany. So kind of why I got into this profession is to help military families not have to go through so much heartache and headache getting themselves relocated to this area. So I love what I do, and I love helping other military families. So to kind of reference with things that both Karen and Jennifer talked about, I do get on a phone call with people that are getting ready to move here and have those conversations about expectations, what they're looking for, sharing resources, etc. And one of the things I do is I share the rental application right up front, because it does require a lot of information. So I was just going to share real quick, just give me 1 second, what actually the application looks like so that everybody can just have a quick peek at it. I'm not going to go line by line, but let me see, let me do that real quick. So our rental application in Northern Virginia, this is just specifically for Northern Virginia. It's a boilerplate document. It is used on probably 99% of rentals that you will get through the MLS. There are some brokerages out there that will do an online version, but a lot of us had talked prior to this call, meaning the realtors that are also on the panel with me, that we have our clients fill this out ahead of time so that way they're prepared, and it's real easy to do the online version if you've got a hard copy of this sitting next to you already filled out. Each application here will take 2 applicants. So if there are more than 2 applicants in the house over age 18, you just make another copy of this and just scratch out where it says 1, and you can put 3 and 4 on here. If you have adult children living with you, they do need to fill it out. If you have college children like I do, they're not full-time residents or wouldn't be considered full-time residents, you do not need to fill that out for them. But if you have somebody living in the house, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, that would also be required. The documentation that you're going to need is all listed here very nicely for you on page 2. You'll see it all here, 1 through 12. And then it just goes through asking you all of your, your previous addresses. A lot of people are putting, Fort Knox, Kentucky. You can try to call my management company, but who knows if you'll get through. Same with employment, just list all of that here. I always advise my clients under additional income to put your BAH. So I just say, put your BAH in there and the amount, because that is additional income, unless you are including it under your employment, under your income already. If you have a rental property that you're renting out and you're getting that rent for that, you can also list it here, because it's kind of like they're going to go over your debts and your income ratio. And so it's really important to have that there. And here's where you would put mortgage, house at Fort Knox, Kentucky, balance. Up here is where you would have put that you're getting the income for that. So it's a 1-to-1 wash for you. Just some really basic questions for each of you to fill out. Know your credit score approximately. You don't need to go run your credit, because we will do that, or whoever the listing brokerage is will run your credit for you and see what your credit score actually is. But if you know what it is, people sometimes put excellent, great, 700, 800, just a little note in there. It doesn't need to be specific. Do you have any animals? And list them here. And list your vehicles and other occupants. So just sort of fill this out before you come. I just find it's really handy to be prepared and have all of those documents ready to go should you find the right property. And I will have a lot of my clients fill it out ahead of time and actually send it to me via email. So that way I have it, because in this competitive market, sometimes people have the best intentions of coming here for a site visit, but the week before they're planning to come, their perfect house comes on the market, and I need to be there because there's 7 other people in the front yard trying to rent it as well. So I will have all your documentation ready to go. We'll send it in and get moving on it. So that's kind of how I advise my clients. I'm sure other realtors on this panel probably do the exact same thing or something a little different.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I've got a great question here in the chat here. So let me read this off to you. Hello, it's an anonymous attendee. We have been looking at rentals and have found that most of the nice ones go within hours of being posted sight unseen. And they've been going for over the rental price, which I've never heard of before. We've also learned that they expect 15-day move-ins from being posted to the lease start date. Is there any way to win on this? I feel like it's almost the same as buying a home right now. Haha, thank you. P.S. We've also heard that it's a hot rental market in the National Capital Region, and a lot of owners do not want to work with realtors on rentals because they need to pay the realtor fee. Is there a better way to get a rental on your own? Is it advantageous for the person renting to pay the fee instead of the owner? What are your suggestions?
Wow, that is a lot of questions.
Nothing like the hot seat there. So maybe you can break it down with like, it's a hot market and then them going quickly in the 15-day move-in. Maybe just start with those two first.
Yeah, so I am in Arlington and have seen the Arlington market absolutely be competitive and also go over asking. I remember there's one property 2 years ago that was posted on Military by Owner, and they think that person got 11 hits within the first hour, had people, no kidding, on the front lawn trying to submit an application directly to the owner. And it was so overwhelming for that owner, they ended up pulling the listing. It wasn't even up, but a mere couple of hours. And I was told after the fact that it went up $700 a month rent. So I'm not saying that's the case across the board. I'm just saying, yes, I've heard of it happening. Yes, it is competitive. And yes, rents are escalating. I mean, I heard last year several times people would say we were one of 5 applications. It became a bidding war for rental amounts and dates of move-ins and how long of a lease term. And, you know, it is the market. I've seen stats that the rental rates are going to go up 7% this year. I think there was a report that came in across the United States that they thought rental amounts were up 40% in some areas. It's only, to be expected, I think, when you look at the housing market and what it's doing on the sale side, and you're seeing the competition there, it's going to trickle down to rentals. And so there's going to be less inventory to buy. There's going to be less inventory to rent because people need a house to live in, whether they're buying or renting. So I think the market is affecting rentals as well. And it's not doomsday. It can be found, it can be had. You just have to be quick on the draw and be ready to go. And, the whole move in early, I mean, landlords are just like sellers. They are setting the terms right now. If you have an application in hand and someone's willing to pay more, move in sooner and stay longer, who are you going to pick if you're the landlord? So it's just the reality of the market. But again, don't panic. It's not helpful. We all know, all the professionals sitting on this panel, we all know how to navigate that and how to best advise you and how to get you a home and, how to talk to the other realtor on the other side, if there is a realtor or a homeowner. And yes, homeowners shut us out all the time. They don't want to deal with us. They don't want to pay our fee. And much like Jennifer said, a lot of us do it as our volunteer time. As a military spouse, all I did for 10 years was volunteer until I became a realtor. So that's my way of also giving back now. So if you need help, you need someone to do a drive-by or a smell test, and people laugh at that when I say I do a smell test. I have a really good nose. I want to walk in that house and see if there's pet smells, urine smells, smoking, any of mold. Not saying I'm a home inspector, but I can usually pick up on a moldy smell very quickly once I open a front door. So, all of those things are important, and why you should, have somebody advocating on your side.
And one thing I want to add too in there is we are not lawyers. The one thing that we do is we do follow, NVAR is our association, and we have the lease that we follow has been vetted through NVAR, and that is the lease that we follow. So we use that lease. So one thing that I know that I do, and that I'm sure that the other panelists is that we are a little hesitant when people go off on their own and they have owners create their own leases. So that's one thing that I'm a little hesitant in. And again, we're not lawyers, but that is one thing that I'm a little hesitant in is when people go off and do their own leases. So we can't legally look at those leases, but I caution when owners create their own leases and say they all think they have the best leases in the world. But that's my hesitancy is just make sure that if you are using an owner created lease, that make sure that it's a good lease. So it has the things that are on there.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a spotlight here on Susie as well, because I think this next part kind of like we're talking about pets for both of you guys. So I'm going to like kick it off, and I'm going to let Susie introduce herself first. And then I'll ask the next question.
Hi, I'm Susie Klein. I am a realtor with Compass. I've lived in the DC area for 8 out of the last 10 years. We moved away and moved back, so I have also PCS'd here twice. My husband retired 21 years in the Air Force in July, so he is civilian now, but we are sticking around at least until our kids are out of school. I'm going to talk about pet resumes. We just talked about all of the documents you need to gather to apply for a rental. Sometimes it can also be very helpful to provide the landlord with a pet resume. And it sounds a little bit silly, but it can really turn the tide for you and your pets. I am going to show you one that a client recently sent me. It's very cute. It's just very basic. It says the animal's name, their breed, their age and weight, and then she was really cute with her what the dog's like. This one likes to nap and play and then nap some more. So she's trying to show that these are older dogs and all they do is lay around and nap. With these kind of documents, one thing that's very important is to not include any family members or to talk about any of the people in the family. You just want to talk about the pets and give the owner an idea of age, weight, and breed, personality, and then also if you happen to have a dog that's a certified therapy animal or has special obedience training or anything like that, it's great to also include that. And if you have a recommendation from a previous landlord or from a vet, also nice to have. This is not always necessary, but sometimes if they're choosing between you and someone else's pet, if you've got a really cute, sweet pet resume, it can really help you out.
Well, that's something in this really hot market that can set you apart from other clients. So I think those are really great tips. And, you know, right now people are feeling really anxious, Susie. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And Kelly commented in the chat, I'm fascinated by the idea of a pet resume. We owned a German Shepherd and put him through canine good citizen training as a puppy. And they attach that to every application to try to head off any issues. So for those of you who are moving in that have multiple pets, like you're just going to want to make sure that you, really talk about that, making your the people feel at ease when you're doing your application. So, all right, Karen, you're up next.
And so we're going to talk about the fees, just and right. I'm going to loop back to the fees. So when you have pets, be very careful. There are pet fees, and there are pet there can be pet fees and pet deposits. So sometimes owners and people try to sneak in those monthly pet fees. So be very, very careful when you're in the MLS. They may sneak in those monthly pet fees. So those monthly pet fees over a 3-year lease can add up. So be very, very careful of those. So expectation of fees, your application fees can be anywhere from $35 to $75 per applicant. So remember what Heidi said is that 18 and above has to apply. There are certain companies that will do, if you're married, they will do it, although it's rare. And yes, there are a couple companies that make a few dollars on your applications. 1 month's rent is your, usually you have 1 month is your security deposit, and 1 month is your fee. So if you have a $3,000 rent, you are going to have to come up with $6,000 right away. So $6,000. So think about that. $3,000. You're going to have to come up with $6,000 right away. I know it's crazy. If you start in the middle of the month, they will prorate your month. So if you come on the 20th of the month, you will have the 20th to the end of the month. So you're going to have to come up with $6,000 plus that 20th to the end of the month. So I talked about the pet deposit. Pet deposits are anywhere from $350 to $500. You will see $1,000. I think it's crazy, drives me crazy, but you will see $1,000. And sometimes if you have 2 pets, it's $1,000 and $1,000. And if you have 5 pets, don't do it. But yeah, I know these they start adding up. I had somebody recently that said they had 5 pets. My owner said, no, I tried, but yeah. So I know these dollars keep adding up and adding up. So just think about the dollars that you have to come up with.
So Karen,
so again,
about the pets. So you talk about pet deposits, but what about pet rent?
So that's what that pet fee, I said it wrong probably, but that pet rent, that's what that is. So you may have a pet deposit of anywhere from $350 to $500. And what we're seeing, and I saw Heidi shaking her head, yes, is that we're seeing a lot of people sneak in these pet rents of anywhere from $25 to $30 a month. And if over 3 years you start calculating that, that's a lot of money per month. So these $25 to $30 pet rent on top of that, you got to think about that. I had one recently that I saw, it was $1,000 pet deposit, and then they had the pet rent. I think it's atrocious. So I'm not hard on, I think it's.
So you also had in your notes, like, oh, have a checkbook. And this is something we talked about a little bit on the panel. And because I've helped people moving to the area, and then I had to do the same thing when I PCS down to Virginia Beach. I had to have a cashier's check, and this had to be handed in person. They wouldn't take a wire amount. So I had to have somebody on hand. And in this case, in Virginia Beach, I used a realtor, and she went and picked up my cashier's check at the Navy Federal Credit Union. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I think I helped another client of yours once upon a time with that in Kingstown.
So you do have to have a checkbook. A lot of us don't have checkbooks, but if you are remote, you will have to be prepared to either wire the money to the real estate agent, or you send it through USAA. We love USAA, but sometimes they're a little slow with it. So it all depends on the agency. So sometimes you will have to either wire it to them or send a cashier's check. Now, if your agent is willing to do that, sometimes they will go get a cashier's check on your behalf, and it all depends on your relationship with that agent. I actually will go, I'll have them send me money, and then through Venmo or whatever, but I have to document the whole thing. I will have them send me money, then I will go and I will get a cashier's check on their behalf, and then I will deliver it to them, because time is of the essence. They will not process your application unless you have that money in hand. So they won't do anything until they have that. So go get the cashier's check, you deliver it to the office, and then they'll do it. So it's first come, first serve. So if you're in town and you're visiting and you're putting an application in, you need to have a cashier's check and or willing to be able to go to it. So a Navy Fed or a local bank, or be able to move money around very quickly with that. So if you have the Venmo or the PayPal or something like that, to be able to move that money around when you do that.
Thanks so much, Karen. Yep. Those are great tips. And I think that, people can watch this again and reach out to you guys if they have more questions about that for best practices. I'm going to go ahead and have Jennifer come on now, and she's going to talk to us about how you work with a realtor and the different sites, and how you can find these listings that everyone is like, oh, it's so elusive. The stuff is going so fast. So she's going to share her best tips about how to be on top of that.
I will. And, thanks to Heidi and Karen, they both kind of alluded to a few comments that I'm going to talk about. Again, as agents, we are not lawyers. So if there's a lease that an owner's doing, we can't really advise you on it. We have to stick with our NVAR leases. And so the sites that realtors can really help you with are the MLS. What is key about that too, is that you're going to see coming soon listings for rentals that you wouldn't normally see. You're not going to see them on Zillow. Zillow back in January of 2021 stopped doing the syndication fees, the feed for rentals. So that's why you don't see rentals anymore on Zillow from the MLS. But there is the caveat to that. An agent can pay to have those rentals listed. So you're not always going to see a complete source of rentals on Zillow. But remember, your agent is going to be your best source for this. So many of us network amongst different brokerages. Like on this panel, we're all from different brokerages. We all have great friends in different brokerages. And we all talk about, if we can't find something, sending out emails, making phone calls, and seeing what's coming soon for that. So your agent is actually your best source. Your agent will also maybe recommend, military by owner, but on military by owner, they're actually by the owner and they're actually by agents. But also on military owner, you have to be careful. You don't have to be in the military to list a rental on military by owner. And a lot of spouses don't realize that anybody can list a home on military by owner. I've seen there's a picture on military by owner for a home for rent here in Springfield, run over to it, and it doesn't match anything to do with that house. And so you have to kind of be careful with that. The other big one is Craigslist. In our area, there is a lot of fraud with Craigslist. It's been shown there's 25 to 50% fraud to do with rentals. They will try to ask for a cashier's check, ask for money. They're probably going to be outdated pictures. If you have a relationship with a realtor, that realtor can help you vet that property and make sure it actually matches. Call the owner, because a lot of times on Craigslist, they just want your money. It's a scam. You can't see the house. You can't see anything in their old pictures. They kind of copy listings that are in the MLS and online. And it's just beware of Craigslist. The other great places that you can look for rentals are PadMapper, Realtor.com, HotPads, AHRN, and of course, one of my favorites, all the Facebook groups. GAMS has just so many rentals. And most of those an agent may or may not work with you. Again, we're all very different how we work with it. I talked about that retainer fee in the exclusive right to represent. If you're solely looking at homes just by owners, that's something you could have that conversation with your owner. Some agents, again, I will venture out and I will not charge my military family. It's why I got my license, because a realtor wouldn't help me one day. So it's very important that you have that conversation with your agent, and they will let you know what they will do and what they won't do. And all I ask my clients, and I'm sure everybody else says on this panel, is if you found something on military by owner, just let us know. Most of us, I'm sure, will run by, do the drive-by, or see if we could talk to the owner to make sure it matches what it is. And just remember, your agent's going to be your best friend in this process. And that's about it with that.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. All right, I'm going to skip over to Susie, and she's going to cover the common questions about the NVAR lease, how long the terms are, and some other addendums and things that might need to come up.
Hi. We keep saying NVAR, and I'm not sure if we've explained it. That's the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors, and all realtors in this area are part of that association, and it gives us access to the legal forms that have been put together by committees of realtors and attorneys. So the NVAR lease is the standard lease that is widely used in the Northern Virginia area. There are different leases in Maryland and DC. Some of those are shared, but Virginia is definitely separate. And any term of your lease should be clearly spelled out in the lease. It's 14 pages long. And at the end of the lease, it has the contact information for the tenant's agent and the landlord's agent. So you should be able to contact either agent on either side with the information at the bottom. The first page is most of the basic terms, the address, the rent. It also shows the total rent that you will be responsible for over the life of the lease. So we get lots of questions about what happens if we terminate early. And if it's not covered by SCRA, which we'll talk about later, the lease says that you are responsible for that total amount of rent unless the landlord releases you in writing from the lease. So all the terms, the length should be there, how to renew, the termination is there. The pet deposit or pet rent would also be spelled out in the lease. And if you do have a pet, there will be additional documents to be added on to the lease regarding everything to do with the pet. And also in the lease, it should spell out who pays for what, the different utilities, lawn service, gutter cleaning, pest control, all of that should be predetermined in your lease. And communication for all the parties involved. The realtors will be at the end of the lease, and then in the body of the lease will be who you are supposed to communicate regarding any issues with the home, whether it's the landlord or the management company. And also many homes around here are located in condos or condo associations or homeowners associations. And you should also get a copy of all of those documents with your lease so that you make sure that you don't break any of the condo rules or the HOA rules. So there are lots of questions we get. Most everything is spelled out in the lease, and your agent should be able to point you to which paragraph to answer your questions.
Thanks, Susie. That was really great and comprehensive. So Karen, I'm going to ask you to come on and talk about the SCRA and the reverse military clause. And Heidi, if you want to chime in on this one too, I know you both have a wealth of experience with this.
Okay, everybody. The being in the military, you should all be very familiar with the Service Member Civil Relief Act, which is called the SCRA. That is this document right here. You can just Google it. I was going to drop in the thing, but it is a big, long document. The one section that you really need to be familiar with specifically talking about with leases, and it's the benefit and protections, which is number 5, residential apartment and lease terminations. So really when it comes down to it is when you get your orders to leave, and you really need to know this, and I don't care who it is if it's you or your spouse, you both need to know this because you're both on the lease. So basically what happens is when you get your orders to leave, if you need to leave before your lease is up, you need to give notice to your owner or to your property manager that you are leaving before the end of your lease. You need to give it on the beginning of the month. So let's say you get your orders on February 15th and you are leaving in a couple months. You need to give that on the beginning of the month because you are responsible for it. So the best thing is if you look at it, and I'm going to read it to you, a lease termination hypothetical under the dates. Jane, service member, receives PCS orders to transfer from Iowa to Texas. She gives her landlord written notice of her intent to terminate her apartment lease and copy of her PCS orders on September 18th. Her next rent payment is due on October 1st. The effective date of the lease termination will be on Halloween, October 31st. So basically, you just need to make sure that you know the dates, because if you gave that date on October, if she gave that on October 2nd, you would then be, you would have to be required to pay the whole next month of November. So it's very critical that you know when your PCS orders are and when your due date is because then you would be liable for the next month, even though your lease is through the end of December. So again, you just make sure that you know that. If anybody has any questions about that ever to come up with that, you can always come back to me and I can walk you through it. But it's very critical with that. I had a client recently who was like, no, I can get out. And I was like, no, we're gonna go to your command. And I told him about it, and he then was like, okay, I see it. So just very clearly. Now, the other one is, which a lot of people don't realize, and we've done this before, is that, yes, you can get out of it. Now, what a reverse clause is in the lease, you can have written, it's a special addendum, is that if your owner is a military owner and they live overseas and they want to come back to the area, and you're like, well, I don't want to take this lease because I don't want to be kicked out. If you have an addendum that says, I will not kick my tenant out when I come back. So basically it needs to be written in there, because if they come back and you don't have that written in there, and this is actually happening to a client of mine right now, they can kick you out of your lease. But if you have an addendum that says, when I come back, I will not kick my tenant out, and they basically have to find another place to live, you can put that in there, and they basically are giving up that right to move back into their house. It's called a reverse military clause.
So
that makes, well, I can't ask
in the chat. Heidi, do you want to answer it? Is this only if the owner is coming back from Oconus?
No.
Okay.
No.
So Karen's example was overseas, but what she really, that was just one example. It could be from anywhere. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when that happens too, if it's in the middle of a year and your children are already settled in a school, and especially elementary school boundaries are so small, to have to find a rental in your exact school pyramid to keep your kids stable, it's, you know, it's a scramble. So very important. I do not care for reverse transfer clauses. I mean, it's not good. It's not good for the tenant, and it leaves you on edge all the time. I mean, the first rental we had here, we rented from State Department. They have a very similar reverse. So don't just think it's military. It's also state and anybody else that comes and goes. And we were worried. I mean, we talked to them at length and they were like, no, it's definitely a 2-year, could be 3-year assignment. And so we rolled the dice, but I can tell you, I was nerves for a while thinking, why did we sign this, you know, lease with this clause in there? So just know what you're signing and know what you're in for. So there'd be no surprise.
And I'm dealing with one right now. And yeah.
So there's a question here in the chat. It says, could the owner return before the lease is up? Could they make you leave even though you still have months left in your lease? And the answer is yes. And that's why it's important to know. This was a really hot topic in a post yesterday or the day before in GAMS about this reverse clause. And someone said, oh, it was terrible for me. And they were out money because they were the military people, but then they were renting and it caused like a whole slew of issues. And not everyone who's military who has rentals does that. Like I rent out.
And the military will not pick up, that move.
That's right.
You're
So you guys make sure you put your questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat, but I do have it up so I can read this before we go on to the next section. If I'm looking for rentals in Maryland and Virginia, can I have 2 different agents for the areas, or can I just have one agent for both? And the answer is yes to both, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes to both.
Yeah. So Heidi, do you want to answer how that would work?
I'm only licensed in Virginia. It's just a personal choice that I made because that's the area that I personally know. And I have, you know, partners that I will refer out to DC and Maryland if I need those covered. So you just have to find out what states that your agent that you're working with is licensed in.
And Karen, you want to talk about what would happen if they asked you?
I'm licensed in DC and Virginia. I refer out to Maryland. Some agents will split it. You know, some agents will split it. Some will say they prefer that you work with one. It does get a little confusing because sometimes, you know, they may say, well, now I want to work in one. So it all depends on the agent, but some do it.
And I think that's a really good point because we are the National Capital Region, and if you've not been there before and you don't really know what the commutes are, you haven't really figured out your neighborhoods and what your feel is and what your priorities are. So this is something like Kelly and I talked about on our PCS tips and tricks webinar last week with MilSpouseFest, and hopefully this is a good time for Mary to drop that YouTube link in the chat here. We talked about make sure that your family has done your priorities and your values, and that what you're looking at for where you're going to rent is aligning with what your family values are. It's really easy to get caught up in the hype of, oh my God, I got to get something and I got to go and I got to do this. So yeah, that's my tip for that. All right, we're going to go on to the next section with Jennifer, and she's going to talk about the move-in checklist and utilities and what's needed for all of that now. So Jennifer.
Yes. Hi. So depending, you know, if you're in a condo, you may not have to set up utilities. Again, it depends what all the fees are. If you're in a townhome or a single family home, you're most likely going to have to pay gas, electric, trash. It just depends. Every house is going to be different. So you need to be prepared to do that. And your agent's going to send you a link to how to set up all those utilities. And on the conditions checklist, I'm going to actually share on my screen this checklist because I'm very anal about move-ins and move-outs. And I want and I'm sure every agent on here wants the same thing, to have you document everything on a move-in. You know, that day one, you're not going to see everything. day 5 and 6, as you're moving in, you're going to find a lot more. And I provide my clients with this detailed list and to also take photos when you move in. I do the 360 of the house, your rental, when you move in. And then this is the checklist, if I can make this work. This is the Virginia Realtors residential move-in and out inspection report. And what I love about this is that when you're finished doing this, we could send it to the landlord, and also your agent will have a copy of it. But it's dated, date of occupancy, date of vacating. Because what this is a form you're going to fill out when you move in and when you fill out. And it's great because it checks every door, every wall, every room in the house. And you can also keep a file with photos that correspond with this. Photos, you know, in today's technology are wonderful because they're date stamped. So you can also have photos with this, because when you move out, say you lived in the house 2 or 3 years, and like Karen said, you had a pet or something paying pet rent, and maybe the landlord disagrees with it. But if you have this document from the moment you checked in to that rental, filled out, given it to your management company or to the landlord, it shows everything that you need to write down. You can write notes, and you can put anything you need to on the check-in. And then coming down, so you would do this when you move in. And then also you're going to have this form when you move out. And the second column here has your move out, and you're going to match and make sure everything's the same and write any note. And this way it just sets you up to defend your deposit. I'm not going to say there are some landlords out there that like to ding you for a lot of small things, like a little pinhole that you hung a picture or something, which they technically shouldn't. And so this is just giving you that documentation and setting you up to have a file, to have the condition of the house when you moved in, and then the condition of the house when you moved out. And then usually it's very easy to dispute anything to do with your deposit. And again, at the bottom, it's a 7-page document. I love documents like this. It will also ask you if there was visible mold. It will ask you location. This is so that you can go back to the landlord or the management company with anything, the amount of keys you received, if you had a mailbox key, a laundry key, storage key. This just lists everything. Some communities here, you're going to receive pool passes or garage door openers. And so having this, you're going to sign it, and then your landlord signs it both on the move in and the move out. And you're not going to have it. Really alleviates a lot of problems you would have in our area. So I'm a really big fan of this to get your deposit back. So keep that short. And I'm sure any agent you work with can send you this form. This is not from the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. This form actually comes from the Virginia Realtors, which is another association. So any questions on that?
I don't see any new questions in the chat right now. So thank you for that. And I think this has been really fantastic. Thanks for everyone for hanging with us. We're almost to the end. We're going to 1:30. And so I'm going to bring on Heidi now, and she's going to talk about what happens if you're in the rental. This is at the end, or maybe in the middle, and your landlord all of a sudden wants to sell. So Heidi, can you share with us about what you're going to do in that situation? And then I've got a question that I'm going to ask you after that too.
Yeah, so before we talk about that real quick, I just wanted to pull up the boilerplate lease that Susie did a great job of outlining for y'all. That transfer of landlord, you'll see right here, just going back a couple of minutes when we had talked about that, see that checkbox right there. So no one's going to slip anything by you. Just make sure that when you're signing that lease, that was what we were talking about. If the landlord resides outside of the Metro DC area, it is hereby agreed to. So you're agreeing to it if that box is checked, whether or not you're going to have to move out. So I just wanted to point that out real quick, that all of these things we've talked about are in writing, and this is a very straightforward 14-page or however many page lease it is, if you can, be straightforward in 14 pages. The next thing that I was going to talk about, though, is on the top of just right before that. The landlord can sell and re-rent the property while you're living there. It can be very disruptive, but it is in the right for the landlord to do that. So if they are going to re-rent it 60 days prior to the end of your lease, they're going to be able to put up a lockbox. They're going to be able to put up a for lease sign. They're going to be able to advertise it. And you have to, make every effort to be cooperative That's subjective what cooperation is. You might ask for a 24-hour notice before any showings. You'll have to negotiate that with your landlord and or property management. But if they want to sell it, they have 90 days. So if your lease ends at the end of June, there could be a for sale sign up on that property on April 1st with a lockbox. So just be prepared that, you know, and as a tenant, your landlord may want you to act like you are the seller and have your house prepared and clean and ready, you know, to be show ready, we call it. So, and that could be disruptive, but it is all spelled out in the lease and that is their right. I know this comes as a shock to everybody when that happens because they're like, no, the quiet enjoyment is a right in Virginia to your rental property. And by that, it means you get to enjoy your property while you live there under the lease without having your landlord bug you all the time about things or, you know, having a neighbor blaring the music or mowing their lawn at midnight or something crazy. That is a right, but this does not apply when you're at the end of the lease and the landlord owner would like to either re-rent or to sell it.
Thanks, Heidi. So we've got a couple of questions here if you want to, there we go. So one is, when searching for homes here, this is Kimberly, she's asking, it was the first time we saw income minimums on listings. Can you speak to the reason for that and perhaps how to get around it when searching?
So the income limits are just to make sure that your debt to income ratio is similar to if you were going to apply for a loan to purchase a home. The ratio that they use in Northern Virginia is 40 times the rent should be equal to your income, or your income should exceed that. So if it's $1,000 a month, your income should be over $40,000 to qualify. Are there ways around it? Sure. I mean, I've heard some agencies will do 38, some will do more, some will do a little bit less. I would imagine if you have a perfect credit score and you have reserves, meaning maybe a savings account that shows you've got 2 or 3 extra months in the savings account, that's a way around it. I had someone last year who didn't qualify and paid 12 months up front. So there's ways to be creative, and all of us here on this panel can help you be creative if that's a problem, the minimum income requirements. For the most part, once you add in BAH and the service members' entitlements and income, you can usually qualify. Depending on your taste. If you're trying to qualify for an $8,000 a month rental, that might not be the case, but it's just a rough ballpark figure. So, you know, if you take right now, I want to spend $3,500, multiply that by 40, see what that gives you, and that should be your minimum income.
You can get creative, but there also are certain rules that they can't do. They can't require certain things too. They can get creative, but they also can't require things. So you just have to know the rules and regulations with that. So your real estate agent will know that as well.
Thanks, Karen. So there was a comment earlier, and I told the person I was going to save the comment about what they were talking about, why you weren't adding individuals' information into the pet resume, why you weren't talking about yourself. And so I wanted to bring that up into like a larger thing and talk about the discrimination. And because it used to be like you'd write a love letter, right, to the new buyer, but now the thought philosophy is like, oh, maybe we shouldn't really be doing that. So do you want to cover that, Heidi?
People are writing love letters to landlords?
Yeah, that's what they...
Fair housing.
Yeah, right. So we want to talk about, like, because I mean, it's more been addressed in the buying process, but like, what do you recommend? What do you guys think about that? Because it's obviously, that's why you said not to put the personal information in, talking about like how great your family is when you're doing your pet resume. So how does that apply for people?
Well, one of the biggest things that the change that I tell people is do not put any photos in. Because I know, you know, when I first started doing this 9 years ago, people were writing photo collages and, here's my pet, here's my daughter, here's my family, and now it's, no photos, no discriminatory type information. Just speak to the property, speak to why you liked that property. We just really have to be, as agents, we have to comply with fair housing. Sellers also, if they're using an agent, have to comply with fair housing. And we hope that everybody's following the law. If people want to write love letters, you make sure you're just talking to your agent about the best wording and the best practice for that. It is definitely becoming more of a black area instead of a gray area, so to speak, because, before we were like, it's kind of a gray area about how we write these, and less letters are being presented at least on the buy side or the sell side. Now we are seeing that people write in the comments, do not send love letters. So to me, that's a big X. Like, no, it's not a gray area anymore. It's a do not write it. They will not present it. You can write it, but they're not going to present it.
And I think what the person's probably asking too is they're probably saying it's competitive in the rental market as well. So and I have seen it in the rental market as well. So, and we probably need to be much more careful about that as well, and make sure that it's we have to be very careful about it with fair housing. If we have a code of ethics, and this hasn't come up in this conversation. We have a code of ethics that we have to follow, and we can get fined on, and we could lose our license. And I don't want to lose my license. And none of us want to lose our license, but there's certain things that we have to abide by through the NVAR, which is our association, and not only our local association, but our state association, and then the other ones. So it's not only in our marketing pieces, but we also want to make sure that, with that, we represent who we are working for. So that's just a small part of that with that.
Thanks, Karen. And the other thing that, I can't believe I didn't mention this when we were doing our planning discussion, but some of you probably followed the state, Delegate Kathy Tran actually put up legislation last year to have in there, she started about making military spouses a protected class, but she also covered some parts about, about the rental process for military families. So I'm not up on the, I don't have the language of the bill in front of me, but it was signed into law last summer. Do any of you on the panel know off the top of your head about what I'm talking about?
Yes, veterans are actually, Jennifer and Heidi, you guys are actually, all of you, that actually the veterans are protected.
Yes, it military. Not just veterans, but active duty as well.
Yes, it became protected. And I actually had to threaten somebody with it a couple months ago.
Yeah, because what was happening was they were being discriminated against. So that can't happen anymore. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. So that's specific to Virginia. That's not.
It is specifically to Virginia. It is specifically to Virginia. And you cannot discriminate against. Yes, you cannot. And I can find that.
So we're up almost on the end of our time. And so we had a question from two different people, and they said, how can I reach the realtors that are on here? So if you guys can go ahead, please, all of you drop your name, your email, whatever other contact information you want to share in the chat. So that way everyone on here can reach you. If I can send out an email after the fact to everyone who registered and include that information, that little flyer and whatever other documents we talked about, I can email that out to everyone who signed up today. So I just want to thank you all for your time and being here and helping out our community. And I promised that I would make sure that I gave my plugs for MilSpouseFest again at the end. So this is something new to us. Kelly and I talked about oh, maybe we can do more of these in other parts of the country. But MilSpouseFest, like I mentioned, we're the modern network for military spouses. And my team member, Mary's going to drop in there in the chat. We have a weekly newsletter that we put out. We have a resource area. We talk about what's going on in the MilSpouse community. We talk about jobs. We also talk about our upcoming events. And to mention that again, we've got our events on February 15th and 17th. They're 3 hours, and there's a daytime and an evening, and we have fun, and we give away prizes, and we've got really great content and ways to connect with each other. And to keep that fun going, we do have a separate Facebook group just to talk about all of our stuff with MilSpouseFest. So it's a little bit different than GAMS. It's not regionally, it's across the country. So everyone's dropping in their links in the chat. So I'm gonna let Kelly say a quick goodbye, and anyone else parting thoughts, and then we'll stop the recording.
You guys just take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. It seems scary right now because you can't really make decisions yet if you're moving in the summer. But as evidenced by the entire panel, it's possible. Assemble your team. Make sure you've got advocates on your side, in your corner, and reach out and ask questions, ask for help. There are tons of people standing by ready to help guide you through this.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, you guys, for organizing it.